Bum 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 da da ba bum bing da ding. Hello and welcome to the Battle of Athos, which, depending on where you're searching on the internet or on which book I pick up, is either the 1st or 2nd of July, in which case 214 years ago today, or, and I say this, or is the 19th to 22nd of June, in which case it's 214 years and about a week ago. Okay, that is helpful, world. That is helpful, historians. One of the things we do like to know is the actual date of a battle. What's interesting is, usually at this point, I go to Wikipedia, because, dirty little secret from my fellow academics and researchers, the people who are doing Wikipedia dates, and this I of course have no experience of ever editing Wikipedia, tend to be rather obsessive about getting the dates correct. However, Wikia, which is the military Wikia, or version of Wiki, has it as the 19th to 22nd of June. I am always slightly less trustful of that one than I am of Wikipedia itself. Just personal experience with it. Yours might be better, in which case it's fine. You know, it's about the same level. There's not much difference in it. And Wikipedia goes with the 1st to 2nd of July. And of course, as you can tell from this, I'm recording this actually at midnight on the 1st of July. Now, why am I recording this so late? Why is this coming out today and not earlier in the week? Honestly, paperwork. And honestly, I love the people in my life. I really do. But I seem to keep having to fight the same fight about whether or not YouTube and all this stuff should be treated as a job. My view is, whilst it's a very fun thing and a hobby, because of Patreon, because of the generous donations of people who've joined the channel, of people donating in Patreon, of people working on Discord, I treat it as a job. And I try to get everything done as if it is a job, you know, with schedules and these sort of things. Occasionally, things like filming TV programs and those sort of stuff comes up, and I have to shift things around at short notice, and I know the very nice people on YouTube will tend to understand. But that's not something I would want to do on a regular basis. And that causes fun. I think it's possibly because most of them have far more conventional careers than I do. I will admit this, and this is the reason I'm getting into this, is because of modern academia, and I do know I have a few young academics and a few what I would call proto-academics, people who are considering going down the PhD route, who are watched in my videos. And I have very much what you call a portfolio career these days. It's a fancy term for saying I do lots of different contracts, and that's how I make my money, and scare the inland revenue whenever the treasury and etc. whenever they decide to try and audit me. I have to have an accountant now to deal with them. I don't earn a lot of money, but when you have many different income streams from different universities and different this, and some of them are giving you research funding, and some of them give you expenses, and some of them give you expenses in terms of tacking into your pay, and some of them don't, it becomes very complicated very quickly, far more than the standard British a PAYE system, automatic tax, can really work it out. So you end up having to employ an accountant. At some point, I'm fairly sure HMRC will probably have to employ their own accountant, external accountant, to audit my accountants, external accountants. It's fun. But no. So you end up with a portfolio of careers you're always juggling. And so when you're juggling these things, people sometimes go, oh, but that's your main job, so this is just a hobby. Well, no, none of them are really a main job, so none of them are hobbies. All of them are hobbies, and all of them are main jobs. It depends on your perspective. YouTube, I have to say, and I know I will be honest about this, my hope for this channel is that it does get enough circulation, it starts in giving people more exposure and more ability to enjoy naval history in a sort of university style, and maybe consider doing some course at university. I'd like to get more people reading naval history, but on a personal level, I'd like to get it up to the point at which it's got enough coming in that I can afford to go, right then, I can say no to one of my lower paying contract jobs and just go, get rid of you, get rid of the issues of dealing with you, and concentrate more on YouTube. Rough calculations is a roundabout, and this shows you how little that particular job pays and how much stress it causes, is that about 15,000 subscribers gets me there. Roughly. Before you ask, joys of modern academia. Anyway, why is this also suitable? Because the whole point about modern academia is, more often than not, it's a game of titles and hats. And the whole way through doing research on the Battle of Athos, no matter which book I was reading, or when I was reading it, or when I was recording this, it all came down to hats and titles. Who was who at this time? At that time. Who was doing what? The Battle of Athos. It's painted in 1853 by Alexei Bogolyov, who only lived 1824 to 1896. Battle took place in 1807. We are certain on the year. Whether it's June, July, we don't know. As said, I've got books which say different, and the websites didn't help me. I don't know. It takes place between Mount Athos and Lemnos, roughly. It's also known as the Battle of Monte Sancto, or the Battle of Lemnos, and it's during the Russo-Turkish War of 1806 to 1812, so taking place pretty much at the beginning of the war. Surely it's an indecisive battle which doesn't have much of an outcome or an impact. It does. It has a massive impact. This is why someone who wasn't even born at the time is commissioned 46 years later to paint a painting of it. But let's all be honest, that painting is probably as an accurate a depiction of it as me going, which is why we should always be worried about paintings. No, it's quite a cool painting, and I will be using it later for other things as well, because it is cool. And so I'm going to expand it, well, this slide, with a mild edit of my title to full screen while I explain some of the background. In December 1806, Sultan Selim III felt threatened. Okay? For those who haven't yet made the connection, between 1806 and 1812, there are still very much the Napoleonic Wars going on. In fact, officially, Napoleonic Wars last from 1803 to 1815, so it's about 3 years either side. Realistically, though, and we can be honest about this, prior to the Napoleonic Wars, there's been the Revolutionary Wars, which was fun. And that went on from 1792 to 1802. It's sort of March 1802. The French Revolutionary Wars are considered to come to a close. May 1803, the Napoleonic Wars begin. So nice of them to take 2 months to have tea and cake in the middle there, you know, just allows us to neatly go, this is one war, that's the other war. Yes. And of course, before the Revolutionary Wars, there had been other interesting conflicts going on. And you start to realise why this was called the Second 100 Years' War. And again, it's slightly longer than 100 years. And has bits of peace in it. However, one of the interesting things when you start to read the Napoleonic Wars and read the various coalitions and French allies and clients, you start to realize that whilst Russia shows up in full force, Sultan Selim III doesn't. This is Sultan Selim III. How can I describe this particular individual? Now, as you know, I try to be balanced and polite for many people. He's eventually deposed and imprisoned by his own Janissary Corps, and his cousin Mustafa is placed on the throne as Mustafa IV. Selim is then killed by a group of assassins. Selim was son of Sultan Mustafa III and his wife Murashna Sultan. Murashna had originated in Georgia, and she had been very keen on reforming government schools and establishing political corporations and various other things. And his father was well educated and had believed in the necessity of reforms, although had attempted to create a powerful army of how do I put this, professional, well-educated soldiers in peacetime, primarily because of threat of Russian invasion. Selim continued this and had declared new military regulations, set up maritime and artillery academies, tried to recruit all sorts of people. He was very open to that. But the trouble is, on one side, you have this sensible, educated, urbane, very capable ruler. On the other side, you have someone who's influenced by mysticism, oracles, predicting his son will be a world conqueror, all sorts of things. Well, that was from Mustafa as well as Selim. And then there's a rather interesting thing, because Mustafa dies. His brother, Abul Hamid, Selim's uncle, becomes emperor. Becomes sultan. And then Selim becomes sultan when he's roughly 26 years old, because Abdul Hamid dies. So it sort of goes father, uncle, son, cousin. If we include Mustafa the Fourth. Yeah, he's just. He has a lot of nice ideas. He just is not able to really deliver them. And his biggest problem is honestly the Janissaries, who've been the core of the Ottoman Empire's military might for centuries, even though they have been sort of degrading themselves in terms of they start off by basically only being recruited, and then they serve their time and go away, and you take boys from conquered territories and train them up. So they're young, they're recruited at a young age. They're basically taken away from their families, so they have no connection with them. They just have each other and the Sultan, and that's who they're supposed to be loyal to. That's the whole Janissary system. By this point, they've started to accept sons. They've accepted of Janissaries. It's become hereditary. There's all sorts of problems in that thing. It's sort of discipline has broken down in some respects because they grew too dependent on it. So one of his reforms have been setting up the Nizam-i Jadid, the New Order, which was from Turkish peasant youths recruited in Anatolia. And they were officered, trained by Europeans, outfitted with modern weapons and French-style uniforms. Guess where the French influence is coming in here? And by 1806, the new army numbered roughly 25,000 troops. About 20,000 trained troops. The rest are ones which are sort of being trained up. And included a modern artillery corps. Unfortunately, Selim was an enlightened ruler, and he was inability to force its integration with the regular army, because the regular army, the Janissaries, saw it as a threat to them and the threat to their independence. It's always worrying when your army considers itself independent of you. And that's what the Janissaries are supposed to do. They didn't seem to notice the duality in that position. We're independent. You're supposed to be serving the Sultanate. It's our independence which matters. See why the Sultan might be having another army? Might. But unfortunately, Selim managed to compound this by actually being an enlightened ruler. He doesn't want to use his new army on his domestic opponents. I'd say the first thing I'd done is swap out my palace guard. First thing I'd done, once I had them trained to the point of 20,000, would have been gone. Right then, there are 4 brigades coming in here. 3 brigades will hold Istanbul. 1 brigade will come protect my palaces. Done. I wouldn't even have told the Janissaries they're coming. Stop them having the ability to depose me at will, and then gone, right then, you will now integrate with the new force. The biggest problem for the Janissaries was that their various sources of income, which they had developed over the years, are growing more interestingly less Janissary, had been directed in many ways to fund the Nizam Ejadid. And there were various members of the ruling elite who objected to the idea of the European models of military force because, that wasn't the Ottoman way. It's a great thing when you declare something. It's the most powerful argument. That's not our way of doing war. Really? Everyone else appears to be winning and fighting wars like this. Perhaps there's a clue going on here. Now, they do this, and over the year of 18... I think it's roughly 1806, but towards the end of it, and 1807, they lead a rebellion against him, depose Selim III, selecting Mustafa IV as successor, who pledges not to interfere with the Janissaries' privileges or independence. Again, you have an army which is independent of you. This could be an interesting scenario. And depose this decree of deposition of Selim III basically includes failing to respect the religion of Islam, the tradition of the Ottomans, and so dismantle all the embassies in Europe, breaking off diplomatic convent. They disperse the Nizam Jadid in the middle of a war, at the beginning of a war against the Russians, and eventually he's killed. Sadly for them, this isn't the brilliant plan they thought it was going to be, because how do I put this politely? Well, how do I put this politely? Mustafa IV will not also be long for this world as a sultan. After managing to take over his cousin's throne, and let's see. As well as having he had Selim killed, he then eventually gets killed by Mahmud, who's Selim's younger brother. And the reforms are re-implemented in honor of his brother, and Mahmud II proves to be a slightly longer lived and longer reigning sultan than either of his predecessors, because he manages to stay in power till 39. Um, 1808 to 1839. All three of them end up fighting this war, and the trouble is what happens at the beginning of it, because at the beginning of it, the navy's falling apart, the army's falling apart, all because of these people who've decided that they don't want to be European. They don't want to follow European practices. They want to do all sorts of things. And this actually leads to one of the more interesting things because here's the thing. Admiral comes from an Arabic term. This is the joy whenever people start telling me, ah, yes, naval power. Oh, that's a Western history and Western study. And you don't. Every time we say admiral, we are using variations on an English translation. Or, well, when I say English, I mean courtesy via the Italians and the French to English translation of an Arabic word, which is Amara, well, term Amir al-Bahar, meaning commander of the seas. So admiral comes from an Arabic word, Arabic phrase, which means commander of the seas. Literally. It's this wonderful history here. Anyway, so the war is pretty much going as badly as you can possibly imagine it was going at this point. How do I put this? Emperor Alexander I is initially having to fight a war with France. And so and looking at down his southern border at what has been going on, is rather less than bothered. And remember, the war starts because Selim III is encouraged by the Russian defeated Austerlitz, the aggression of the Russians towards him and him feeling threatened by them, and how do I put this politely? Various other little policies to try and unite his realm, honestly. You think the foreign war and the chance of conquest was his attempt to go, well, you know, you Janissaries, you'll fight with my other especially my other troops, and you'll go on to win great victories. Instead, the Janissaries go, oh, but we want to win the war in the traditional way. So, the main Ottoman offensive is aimed at Russian-occupied Bucharest, the Welsh capital. And that is stopped by Mikhail Milovic with 4,500 soldiers. And when I say the main Ottoman offensive, I think they possibly outnumbered him 5 or 4 to 1. There are various debates on that one. But we do know that a secondary attack of 20,000 troops was destroyed in Armenia at Arpachia by a 7,000 strong contingent under the command of Count Gudovich. And then we get on to the Russian Imperial Navy, which decides it's going to blockade the Dardanelles and fight the Battle of Dardanelles, after winning which, that's when Selim III is disposed. Because after losing these battles, and most of the people losing these battles have not been his picked troops, because they've been insisting on the Janissaries going first, their thing is, the fault is you. Not the way for the war we're fighting, and we're going to get rid of you, and we're then going to carry on fighting, because he's been using the losses to go, can we put some better trained soldiers in? A proper modern artillery corps, please? Some decent infantry, cavalry. You know, things which in my books and all the accounts of the other battles have been winning them. That have been going on for the last, well, let's be honest, nearly 100 years at this point, but specifically, if we consider since 1803, the Napoleonic Wars, since 1792, the Revolutionary Wars. Yeah. it gets fun. But let's go to the naval campaign. So, Ottoman leadership for the fleet. Kabudun Aidera, the otherwise known as the captain of the sea. So, slightly junior to an admiral, but theoretically is a person in charge, and is Saeed Ali Pasha. And no, I don't have a picture of him. I don't. Barely have a picture of the sultans. Second in command is Bakir Bey, and even less is known about him, and he gets his ship captured. And if you do have books which have been this is the thing is, I think there is possibly a lot out there about these two leaders. They do not come from nowhere, but I have a feeling it's, judging from where I've been hunting, if it is out there, it's in non-English language sources. In which case, I'd love to hear more. Because I think they tried their best. They didn't do that greatly, because they weren't that great, but they did try their best. To start off with the Russian Vice Admiral Dmitry Severin, who is an interesting character. Does all sorts of games against them, but you know, these things happened. Ali Pasha, we know, was born in Georgia. He's a brother of Alia Tablas, who lived in Algeria most of his life, but then moves to serve in Istanbul. He serves in role from 1807 to August 1808, and again from November 1808 to 1809. Between August and November 1808, he's the governor of Silestra Eilat, which is a province along the Black Sea. And when he eventually does leave office, he was exiled to Western Turkey area. And again, he's exiled when, I think unsurprisingly, Mahmud comes into power. So I'm fairly sure, how do I put it? He was one of the voices really, really shouting, "It's not my fault I lost my battle. It's the Sultan's." At which point, if I'd been the Sultan and I'd replaced the Janissaries guarding my palace, I'd have gone to my new troops. Yeah. Dungeons. Anyway, leaving that to one side, let's get on to the Russian leadership. Dmitry Nikolaevich Semerovin, always a fun gentleman. And Alexei Grieg. Alexei Samovich Grieg. Now, there are many claims made about Severin, including that he's one of the greatest admirals of the Napoleonic Wars. I'll be talking about him later this year because of the Battle of Navarino. And he'd already fought in the Russo-Turkish War of 1787 to 92. I'm not sure I'd call him above average for a Russian admiral, and I usually do consider Russian admirals pretty good. But to me, greatest means you have to be in top 10 of the admirals in World War II. Not in World War II, I mean in the Napoleonic Wars. And, no, he doesn't quite make my top 10. Grieg, some of the things he does, maybe. But, no. He also has a fall from grace at the end of his career, but he's born to a family in a family estate near Borovsk. He does come from a noble naval family, and he graduates from the Naval Cadet Corps in 1780. So he's been in serving in the fleet, well, with various forces, for 27 years by the time of this battle. He's been on expedition to Portugal, joined the Black Sea Fleet on its formation in 1783, helped construct a naval base in Sevastopol, and in 1786 he commanded a packet boat. Thanks to basically family connections and preventing a flagship capsizing during the Varma expedition, he ended up getting rapid promotion. Eventually, he gets into a bit of trouble with some of his senior officers and various personnel. And goes on a few campaigns, does a few things here and there. He's quite a successful officer, but honestly, I would say this battle is probably his greatest one. Then we have Alexei Grieg, of course, who has an excellent name, so is immediately very good. Doesn't have the full beard. He needs the full beard, but we'll take the Alexei. He's of course son of Admiral Samuel Grieg, and he studies at Royal High School in Edinburgh under Alexander Adam. Serves as a volunteer aboard HMS Culloden under Thomas Trowbridge. Starts his career in the Royal Navy. Returns to Russia to take part in Mediterranean expeditions against France from 1798 to 1800 under the command of Severin. And then goes on to distinguish himself in 1807 at the Battles of Athos and Dardanelles. At the close of the Napoleonic Wars, he's in charge of the sea blockade of Danzig. And has quite a full career. He ends his career in great respect. He's a Scottish-born admiral, but he ends being appointed by Emperor Nicholas I as a member of the State Council of Imperial Russia and superintending the construction of the Polokov Observatory, which is to do astronomical observations for Russia to try and improve their navigation ability. He has an amazing career, amazing start, and frankly, he's a really, really cool guy. And again, it's another of those joys of history that there are officers we don't know about. In this case, we don't know about these two that much because I don't think the sources are in the English language yet. And I wish they were, because I could use them as good examples. And in the case of these two, one gets a little bit overblown and one gets forgotten because he's Scottish who goes on to serve the Russians. So neither the British want to talk about him that much, especially not during the Cold War period, and the Russians don't want to talk about him that much. Life happens. So, Ottoman order of battle, fairly capable. You'll notice there is a first rate, and a lot of second rates there. A lot of second rates. 6 second rates, 3 third rates, a first rate. That's a heavy ship of the line, ships of the line fleet. And the frigates are fairly heavy. Sloops, fairly heavy. They have a lot of guns, and you'll also see from there that there are a couple of them are captured. You might be guessing which way this fleet operation goes. And then we have the Russian order of battle. Okay, you've probably all noticed something. Now, Skuri and Sliny, as far as I know, are 74 gunships. I've been looking into this, and I'm fairly certain those are 74 guns in that incarnation. However, I would like to make a plea. Could someone, and I know there are various, I have looked at various orders of battle, including John Trede's and Edward Swazo's Russian warships in the Age of Sail, 1696 to 1860, design, construction, careers, and fates. It's lovely. It's a UKC4 book publishing. I'll find a link down below, hopefully, if I remember to put it in. It's a lovely book. But this is subject matter which I think could honestly do with a lot more illumination and a lot more coverage. There just isn't enough. Because it's not only the best, it's the best book, it's the only book really available. And I think you needed an even bigger book. And I think you needed a lot more research to be able to get just the careers of them. Because it's just nuts. The Russian Navy is just nuts. And they keep renaming ships, and sometimes ships are renamed, and it's a ship in the same class which gets that name, and you're going, but it's exactly the same. Why have you renamed the ships? Well, that name should be on a more powerful ship, but they're exactly the same in the member of the class. And you think British naming is weird. British Age of Sail naming is frankly uniquely brilliant and clear and clairvoyant compared to the Russian one. So, opening of the campaign. There's already been this pesky battle called the Battle of the Dardanelles. Now, in that battle, Saeed Ali fought Dmitry Senyavin, and while Senyavin had 10 ships of the line and a frigate on his command, Saeed Ali had 8 ships of the line, 6 frigates, and 50 smaller ships. And here's the thing. Saeed Ali is actually leading his force out to attack Tenedos, which is the base of the Russian Navy in the Aegean. Senyavin spotted this. He saw this coming. And instead of going out to necessarily fight them straight away, he goes round and goes, what can I do here? So he sails out and round them and blocks them getting home. Now, this is a gamble because at one point the winds are calm and the Russians are unable to either reach Dardanelles or return to Dardanelles at one point. So Saeed Ali takes advantage of this and begins to attack the Russian naval base by means of gunboats and land forces. However, despite having brought quite a large force with him, he proves unable to do this and managed to lose most of 2,000 troops there and then. Again, this doesn't sound like the Sultan's fault to me. I'm sorry, but once you're at that point of the operation, it's no longer the political masters who are responsible for it. You've got the troops, you decided it's practical, you've tried to launch the attack. So, and at this point, Senevin managed to get back to Tenedos. And when he realizes that said elite squadron has not gone away and it's within range, he decides to attack them. And Said Ali's response to this is to weigh anchor immediately and flee to the safety of the Dardanelles. Now, you're going to sit there and go, but they have 2 more ships of sail than they do this makes some extent. Surely they can double up on them. Well, the thing is, if you're anchored in mild sea and your frigates outnumber their frigates 6-1, and you have 50 smaller ships, I'm just saying, I don't think it would take a creative genius to figure out, I don't know, something you could do to keep, I don't know, 3 or 4 of those particular those ships, enemy ships of the line, busy. So you ended up with a superiority of 2, especially when you consider that most of the Russians are third rates and most of your forces second rates. So if you have a superiority, you should in theory be able to back them away. What's even more fun is the battle manages to continue into the straits, with occasionally the Russian ships getting close in range of the Turkish forts and their shore batteries and getting battered by them. It just, it's not a romping, stomping Russian superiority of force here. Now, then we have, as I've already mentioned, what's going on land at this point. That's in the Caucasus region, which is just a nightmare for both sides. And lots of different factions involved as well. Here's that lovely painting again. So here's the Battle of Athos. To lure the Ottoman Navy back into the Aegean Sea, Senevin decided to pretend, using manoeuvres, that he'd lost ships. He didn't have enough ships at the entrance to the Dardanelles, that they had to go back. And This included sending Grieg and his squadron, with 4 battleships, off to the Dardanelles. And then eventually he sent out with his full force of 5 battleships back there. And landed Marines temporarily again at Nanos. But then returns his squadron to Tenedos and is waiting there for the call. So it looks like Dmitri is down to 5 ships. Now again, this is the sort of thing where you go, well, why don't if they're anchored outside the Straits of Dardanelles, why aren't the Ottomans, with their superiority of numbers, trying some sort of night small boat attack or something like that? Anyway, eventually, Said Ali leaves the Dardanelles, a task force of here is the interesting thing: 8 ships to the line and 5 frigates. Again. So he now has a 5-to-1 superiority in terms of frigates, but he's still outnumbered in terms of battleships. So, this goes on, including at certain points the Ottomans managed to get to Tenedos and bombard there and do all sorts of things to try and wind up Severin. And eventually, they do. Eventually, the Russians and the Turks are in a position where neither side can avoid or wants to avoid battle. Severin catches up with them between early morning on the 1st of July. Turks had their ships line aligned in a straight row heading north. Beautiful. Severin decides to arrange his battleships in 2 parallel rows, each being led by one of the admirals. Now, the thing about Severin he noticed was that the Russian fleet was, the Ottoman fleet was incredibly dependent upon their admirals. They were incredibly focused upon their admirals. If anything happened to their admirals, they had a tendency to fall apart. If their admirals just stopped communicating for a while, they had a tendency to fall apart. So you're going to guess what I'm going to say. He decided to focus on the admirals, and this is what he does. Now, the Ottomans have noticed a similar thing in the Russians, and they try to do the same by concentrating on the Raphael, which is the lead Russian ship, and, that has to fall back at one point, but it does keep on going. And what the battleships manage to do is they manage to sort of go up and use a pair for each ship in the Ottoman line. Senevan actually decides to really race up the column and manages to put a leading Turkish frigate out of action, which caused the ship's line following the frigate and the entire Turkish column to have to heave to and slow. So basically they now have an obstacle in there, so they have to manoeuvre. Ship's line can keep going, straight line, can keep up good speed. Moment they have to manoeuvre. Oh, Senevan's smart. Eventually, after about 10 a.m., the Turks managed to break away with the Russians in pursuit. And the next morning, on the 2nd of July, 2 Ottoman ships of the line are seen struggling, and a sloop are seen falling behind the fleet. They're damaged. And eventually, the Russians chased them and forced them ashore, and they're basically the Ottomans get forced to burn them. Stop them being captured. Results. Well, we have the Treaty of Silt, which is between Napoleon I of France and Alexander of Russia, which of course doesn't involve the lovely Ottoman Empire, but it means at that point that the Ottomans realise, hang on, we'll use the French. Because if they do anything else, the Russians can now concentrate on them. And that is exactly what happens after the Treaty of Salt. It does. After that point, basically, it just goes, what can we do? We want peace. No. War keeps on going until the Treaty of Bucharest. So they've gone in for a quick win, and they've ended up with a bloody war. And they've lost 3 ships of the line, 3 frigates, 2 sloops. And many people have lost faith in the Ottoman Navy for some reason at this point. I can't think why. Doesn't get really a proper navy, doesn't get fielded for about 2 or 3 decades after this. And it's all about what happens down here. It's not a large portion of water. I would love to say both sides tried their best, but honestly, I have a firm belief that one side really didn't. And my thinking about that side not trying its best is that it was coming out expecting to fight a sort of battle, a very regimented, organised sort of battle, even at sea. And that wasn't the kind of battles you were fighting now. Whether at sea or land, battles were turning into battles of manoeuvre. I know that's strange to talk about because, especially with the legacy of World War One, we have this idea of wars being, especially prior to World War Two, being not wars of manoeuvre. They're stationary, but they're not. The American Civil War, Napoleonic Wars, they're wars of manoeuvre. The reason for trench warfare in World War One is because of the power of artillery and the power of machine guns, but also of the fact that they were trying to stop the German ability to manoeuvre. The whole point of digging trenches along that was to stop and limit the way for your opponent to manoeuvre around you. It was a great idea. If we man trenches, that means they can't manoeuvre around us. So yeah, our field army will advance them and move around them, but we'll block off the stuff this side of them, so they can't run behind them with trenches. Great idea. Brilliant. This was a war of manoeuvre. There were whole campaigns fought with barely a battle, but they were decided by where troops managed to get to geographically. You can not control the Dardanelles pre-mine without a fleet. Yes, cannon and forts on shores will give you a mighty punch, but you need the fleet as well. In the nicest way, therefore, Said Ali Pasha had one job. He had to keep that fleet alive, or he had to win. He didn't manage to do either, because honestly, at no point does he really commit. He has pretty much a whole day at Tenedos at one point, where he has all his ships at a line, all his frigates, sloops, and all these little small ships. All his troops. And he doesn't overwhelm his enemy. He underwhelms them. Enjoy. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope this was interesting to you. What have we got coming up? We have the sea power behind the Ring of Iron, it's like Naystone, in terms of long patrols, and live this evening when this comes out is going to be the Battle of the Philippine Sea. Take care, thank you, and thank you.